Unveil the extraordinary saga of Marietta Peabody Tree, an iconic figure whose life story is a masterclass in empowerment, innovation, and unyielding drive. This comprehensive biography video takes you on an immersive journey through the triumphs and trials of a visionary woman who redefined boundaries in elite circles, governance, and global affairs. With a blend of elegance and tenacity, Marietta Peabody Tree's path inspires anyone seeking motivation from real-life heroes who dared to dream big and act boldly. Emerging from a background rich in heritage and opportunity, Marietta Peabody Tree transcended expectations to craft a legacy of influence and change. Her experiences form a tapestry of bold decisions, meaningful alliances, and relentless pursuit of ideals that resonated far beyond her time. As a central player in pivotal moments of the 20th century, she connected with trailblazers and catalysts, contributing to advancements in equity, advocacy, and cultural evolution that continue to echo today. Dive deep into the intricate dimensions of Marietta Peabody Tree's world, the foundational elements that fueled her growth, the intimate bonds that shaped her perspectives, the career milestones that broke barriers, and the obstacles she overcame with remarkable fortitude, ideal for history buffs, admirers of empowering female narratives, or those intrigued by the architects of societal progress. This biography delivers profound insights into guidance, affection, and lasting contributions. Embark with us to reveal the essence of her timeless allure, enriched by historical perspectives and heartfelt tales that animate her dynamic essence. Tailored for searches like Marietta Peabody Tree Biography, inspirational women leaders' stories, or influential figures in diplomacy and reform. Seize this opportunity for an enlightening watch. Press play to explore how a single individual's foresight can redefine eras. Feel moved? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more riveting life stories. Mary Endicott Peabody was born on April 17, 1917, in the bustling industrial town of Lawrence, Massachusetts. She quickly became known by her affectionate nickname, Marietta, a moniker that would accompany her through a lifetime of social, political, and diplomatic achievements. The name Endicott held particular resonance in her full birth name, Mary Endicott Peabody. It was not merely a middle name, but a direct link to her great-grandmother's maiden name, embedding her in a lineage that traced back to Governor John Endicott, a pivotal figure in American colonial history. As the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1629, Endicott was known for his stern Puritan governance, his role in establishing early settlements, and even bold acts like defacing the English flag to remove the cross, symbolizing his commitment to religious purity. He also planted the first fruit trees in the colonies, blending rigidity with innovation, a duality that perhaps echoed in Marietta's own blend of traditional upbringing and trailblazing spirit. Growing up aware of this ancestral connection, Marietta carried the weight of history from her earliest days, fostering a sense of destiny tied to public service and reform. Lawrence, Massachusetts, where Marietta was born, was a vibrant yet challenging place in 1917. As a major textile manufacturing hub, the city had recently emerged from the infamous 1912 Bread and Roses strike, a landmark labor uprising that highlighted immigrant workers' struggles for better wages and conditions. Amid this backdrop of industrial energy and social tension, Marietta's family represented the upper echelons of New England society, insulated by privilege, but not immune to the era's calls for justice and charity. World War I raged overseas, with American involvement just beginning in April 1917, adding a layer of global uncertainty to her infancy. Yet, her home life was anchored in stability, faith, and community involvement, setting the foundation for her resilient personality. Marietta was the only daughter in a family dominated by strong male figures, born to Malcolm Endicott Peabody and Mary Elizabeth Parkman. Her father, Malcolm, was a dedicated Episcopal clergyman who served as the rector of Grace Episcopal Church in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Born on June 12, 1888, in Danvers, Essex County, Massachusetts, a town with its own rich colonial history, tied to the Salem witch trials, Malcolm embodied the moral and educational ethos of his forebears. He pursued a life of spiritual guidance, preaching sermons that likely emphasized ethical living, social responsibility, and the importance of education, themes that would resonate deeply with Marietta. His tenure at Grace Church involved ministering to a diverse congregation in an industrial city, where he addressed both spiritual needs and community issues, perhaps influencing Marietta's later activism. Malcolm lived a long and impactful life, passing away on June 20th, 1974, during a time when the nation grappled with the Watergate scandal, a reminder of the political turbulence that bookended his era. Her mother, Mary Elizabeth Parkman, complemented Malcolm's clerical role with her unwavering commitment to philanthropy and volunteer work. Born on July 24, 1891, in Boston, Suffolk County, Massachusetts, a city synonymous with American intellectual and revolutionary heritage, Mary Elizabeth dedicated herself to charitable causes, possibly including organizations like the Red Cross or local aid societies, which were prominent in the early 20th century. She played a crucial role in instilling in Marietta a passion for community service, encouraging her daughter to look beyond personal privilege and engage with societal needs. This maternal guidance was instrumental, as Mary Elizabeth actively modeled how women could wield influence through altruism and advocacy. She outlived her husband, passing away on February 6, 1981, in the early days of the Reagan administration, having witnessed dramatic shifts from the Gilded Age to the modern civil rights era. Marietta's paternal grandparents further enriched this tapestry of influence. Her grandfather, Reverend Endicott Peabody, was a towering figure in education and religion, founding Groton School in 1884 and serving as its first headmaster. Born on May 30th, 1857, in Salem, Essex County, Massachusetts, a port city famed for its maritime trade and infamous witch trials, Endicott Peabody envisioned Groton as an institution to mold young men into ethical leaders, emphasizing muscular Christianity, a philosophy blending physical vigor, moral integrity, and intellectual pursuit. Under his leadership, Groton became a feeder school to Harvard and produced alumni like President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who credited Peabody with shaping his character. Endicott's life spanned from the pre-Civil War era to World War II, dying on November 17, 1944, amid the Allied advances in Europe. His wife, Fanny Peabody, born on October 12, 1860, provided the familial warmth and support essential to such a demanding household. Living until March 4, 1946, in Danvers, Massachusetts, where she likely oversaw the domestic side of their educational legacy. On the maternal side, Marietta's grandparents brought elements of business acumen and political savvy. Her grandfather, Henry Parkman, born on May 23, 1850, was a respected entrepreneur and politician in Boston, navigating the Gilded Age's economic booms and busts. Boston, in his time, was a hub of innovation. With the rise of railroads and industry, and Henry's involvement in civic affairs would have exposed the family to the intricacies of governance. His wife, Mary Frances Parker, born on June 20, 1855, contributed to educational advancements, reportedly helping to found Radcliffe College, the women's counterpart to Harvard, reflecting a commitment to female empowerment that foreshadowed Marietta's own trailblazing. Mary Frances lived through monumental events, from the Civil War to the attack on Pearl Harbor, passing away on July 14, 1942, in Newark, Essex County, New Jersey. As the sole girl among four brothers, Endicott, Samuel, George, and Malcolm, Marietta grew up in a dynamic competitive environment. Some records specify her brothers as George Lee Peabody, Samuel P. Peabody, and Malcolm Peabody Jr., with Endicott often called Chub, who later became the governor of Massachusetts from 1963 to 1965, known for his progressive policies. All four attended Groton School, the institution their grandfather founded, where they were immersed in a rigorous curriculum of classics, sports like rugby and crew, and character-building dorm life. Stories from their experiences, tales of strict discipline, intellectual debates, and athletic triumphs likely filled family dinners, inspiring Marietta while also highlighting the gender norms of the time that barred her from similar opportunities. Being the only daughter, she might have felt both cherished and challenged, forging a determination to carve her own path in a male-dominated world. The family's roots extended even further, with great-grandparents who exemplified the entrepreneurial and intellectual spirit of 19th century America. On the paternal side, Samuel Endicott Peabody, born April 19, 1825, and dying October 30, 1909, in Salem, Essex County, Massachusetts, was likely involved in merchant or banking activities, given Salem's trading legacy. His wife, Marianne Cabot Lee, born October 11, 1828, and dying exactly on her birthday in 1911 in Boston, came from the prominent Cabot family, known for their shipping fortunes and social prominence. Another paternal great-grandparent pair was Frances Peabody, born March 26, 1831, dying April 29, 1910, in Salem, and Helen Bloodgood, born July 4, 1834, dying August 7, 1911, also in Salem. Their lives in Salem during the clipper ship era suggest involvement in maritime commerce, contributing to the family's wealth and status. Maternally, Samuel Parkman, M.D., born January 21, 1816, and dying young at 38 on December 15, 1854, in Boston, was a physician whose early death from illness left a legacy of medical service in a time when epidemics like cholera ravaged cities. His wife, Mary Elliott Dwight, born January 24, 1821, and dying December 8, 1879, in Boston, raised the family with resilience, tied to the Dwight family of educators and reformers. The other maternal great-grandparents were John Cortlandt Parker, born June 27, 1818, dying July 29, 1907, in Perth Amboy, Middlesex County, New Jersey, possibly in law or business, and Elizabeth Wolcott Stites, born April 11, 1827, dying January 1, 1907, in Savannah, Chatham County, Georgia. Their connections to the Wolcott family, including a signer of the Declaration of Independence, added revolutionary prestige, with lives spanning from northern industry to southern reconstruction. Delving deeper into second-generation ancestors revealed a mosaic of post-revolutionary builders. Frances Peabody, born December 7, 1801, dying October 31, 1867, and Martha Endicott, born November 27, 1799, dying March 12, 1891, represented early 19th century expansion in Boston and Salem. John Clark Lee, born April 9, 1804, dying November 19, 1877, and Harriet Payne Rose, born February 5, 1804, dying August 4, 1885, linked to finance and possibly Paine family radicals like Thomas Paine. Nathaniel Bloodgood, born August 20th, 1805, dying March 16, 1859, and Eliza Antoinette Crocker, born 1810, dying August 19, 1891, brought New York mercantile ties. Samuel Henry Parkman, born September 1792, dying 1849, and Mary Mason, born before 1797, were post-war rebuilders in Boston. Edmund Dwight, born 1780, dying 1849, a mill owner and philanthropist, and Mary Harrison Elliott, born May 15, 1788, dying October 12, 1846, connected to literary Elliots. James Parker, born March 3, 1776, dying April 1, 1868, and Penelope Butler, born March 3, 1785, dying young July 25, 1823, evoked revolutionary resilience. Richard Wayne Stites, born November 24, 1802, dying July 2, 1877, and Elizabeth Cook, born April 6, 1806, dying February 29, 1896, suggested military or commercial pursuits in the expanding nation. This extensive lineage wasn't abstract for Marietta. It infused her childhood with stories of achievement, duty, and innovation, preparing her for a life intersecting with major historical figures and events. The Peabody family's emphasis on education and service, from Groton's founding to charitable works, created an environment where intellectual curiosity and moral obligation were daily norms. Transitioning to her own education, Marietta's formative years blended traditional Polish with personal rebellion. She attended St. Timothy's School, an Episcopal girls' boarding school in Catonsville, Maryland, known for its rigorous academics and emphasis on character development. Founded in 1882, St. Timothy's offered a curriculum heavy on literature, languages, and the arts, but Marietta particularly excelled in athletics, dominating track and field events. Sprinting across manicured fields, leaping hurdles with determination, she displayed a competitive edge that mirrored her ancestors' tenacity. Sports at St. Timothy's built physical strength and teamwork, fostering the grit she would later apply to political battles. Dorm life, with its shared rooms and communal meals, taught social graces and independence, while chapel services reinforced the Episcopal values from home. Upon graduating, Marietta sought to evade the conventional college route, embarking instead on a grand tour of Europe, a rite of passage for affluent young women in the interwar period. This journey, likely involving steamship crossings and train travels, took her through iconic cities like Paris, with its Eiffel Tower and cafes buzzing with post-World War I vitality, Rome, where ancient ruins whispered of empires, and beyond. It was a time of cultural immersion, attending operas, visiting museums, and mingling with European aristocracy, all while the continent simmered with rising tensions from fascism and economic depression. To further refine her sophistication, she enrolled in a finishing school in Florence, Italy, a city of Renaissance splendor. There, amid the Duomo and Uffizi Gallery, she studied etiquette, languages like French and Italian, art history, and conversational skills, honing the poise that would make her a renowned socialite. This period allowed her to absorb global perspectives, avoiding the structured academia she initially resisted, and perhaps igniting an interest in international affairs. Yet even in her youth, Marietta demonstrated prescient self-awareness. When prompted to predict her future, she distilled it into three evocative words: parties, people, and politics. This triad foreshadowed her life as a hostess of glittering soirees, a connector of influential networks, and a dedicated political operative. Parties represented the social world she would master, people, the relationships she cultivated, and politics, the arena where she would advocate for change. Despite her initial aversion, her father Malcolm's insistence proved transformative. Recognizing the value of higher education in a changing world, especially for women amid the Great Depression, he compelled her to enroll at the University of Pennsylvania in 1936. UPenn, a prestigious Ivy League institution in Philadelphia, offered a liberal arts curriculum that expanded her horizons during a time of economic hardship and FDR's New Deal reforms. She immersed herself in courses on history, literature, and perhaps social sciences, engaging with diverse ideas that challenged her privileged worldview. Though she withdrew from the class of 1940 without graduating, possibly due to personal interests or emerging opportunities, Marietta later reflected profound gratitude in interviews. "I will never stop being grateful to my father for forcing me to go to college. It changed my life." This experience broadened her intellect, introduced her to new circles, and equipped her with analytical skills for her future roles. During her time at UPenn, Marietta also joined the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, a historic organization founded in 1908 at Howard University, traditionally serving black women but evidently extending membership in her case, perhaps as an honorary or inclusive gesture. This involvement provided a sense of sisterhood, community engagement, and leadership training, echoing her mother's charitable ethos and foreshadowing her civil rights advocacy. By around 1939, as World War II loomed, Marietta's childhood and education had molded her into a woman of depth, ready to step beyond family shadows. From the historical weight of her name and lineage to the personal growth through schooling and travel, these years laid a robust foundation. The privilege of her upbringing, tempered by familial expectations of service, propelled her toward a life of impact, where parties, people, and politics would indeed define her legacy. During her university years, Marietta attracted the attention of Desmond Fitzgerald, a skilled New York City lawyer who had graduated from Harvard Law School. Desmond, born in 1910 into an Irish-American family, his father was Edmund Fitzgerald, had established a solid reputation on Wall Street, working at prestigious firms such as Spence, Hopkins, Walser, Hotchkiss, and Angel. He demonstrated ambition early on, enlisting as a private in the United States Army in 1940, just as their shared life was beginning to take shape. Over the course of his military service, he advanced to the rank of major, serving in the demanding Pacific Theater, including operations in Burma, where his efforts in coordination and leadership earned him the Legion of Merit for acts of bravery. Prior to these developments, however, during Marietta's college period, Desmond pursued her with a determined and traditional approach. Their interactions often involved extended late-night discussions on topics ranging from legal matters to broader societal and global issues, during which Marietta displayed an early inclination toward political engagement and interpersonal dynamics. The college environment fostered moments of subtle connection, brief glances exchanged in passing, occasional weekend trips to New York, and the gradual building of a bond that carried an air of excitement against the backdrop of the late 1930s. This era saw the gradual easing of the Great Depression's grip on the economy, with recovery efforts underway. Yet Europe was increasingly destabilized by the rise of fascist regimes, creating a sense of impending crisis. Even at this stage, Desmond's conservative inclinations contrasted with Marietta's emerging liberal perspectives, likely leading to spirited exchanges, though their mutual affection prevailed over these differences. This courtship culminated in their marriage on September 2nd, 1939. The date was marked by extraordinary historical coincidence, as Adolf Hitler's forces had invaded Poland just one day earlier, igniting the outbreak of World War II in Europe. Global tensions were at a peak, with newspapers dominated by reports of conflict and uncertainty. Yet for Marietta and Desmond, the occasion represented a commitment filled with hope and promise. The ceremony aligned with the expectations of their social networks, featuring an elegant arrangement attended by relatives from both families, including the distinctive Irish-American heritage from Desmond's side. At the age of 22, Marietta entered this new phase of life with considerable vitality, prepared to establish a household in New York City. The couple settled into the vibrant urban setting where Desmond continued his legal practice, handling corporate litigation and advancing his professional standing. Their early married life encompassed a variety of social engagements, such as dinners at refined establishments like the 21 Club, evenings at the theater, and interactions with influential figures in elite circles. Beneath this routine, however, the encroaching reality of war cast a persistent shadow as the United States grappled with debates over isolationist policies versus active involvement in international affairs. Marietta, even in these initial months, began to contemplate roles beyond the domestic sphere, her thoughts extending to the larger geopolitical landscape and potential avenues for personal contribution as worldwide strains intensified. 1 year after their wedding, the couple experienced the arrival of their first child. On October 21st, 1940, Marietta gave birth to a daughter named Frances Fitzgerald, who would later be affectionately known as Frankie. This newborn became a source of profound joy, providing a focal point of positivity amid a world growing more unstable. Marietta embraced her role as a young mother, tending to her infant in the setting of their New York apartment, which might have included a dedicated nursery space offering views of the bustling streets below. The responsibilities of parenthood introduced new dimensions to their relationship, enriching it through shared experiences such as nighttime care routines, observing developmental milestones like initial steps, and outings as a family in locations like Central Park. Frances would eventually distinguish herself as an accomplished individual, earning a Pulitzer Prize for her work as a journalist and historian, particularly noted for publications such as Fire in the Lake, which examined the Vietnam War. In those early days, however, she simply represented the innocence and warmth of family life during challenging times. The beginning of the 1940s presented numerous hardships, including the gradual implementation of rationing systems that limited access to essentials, constant radio broadcasts detailing overseas military engagements, and the implications of Desmond's 1940 enlistment, which signaled impending absences and required Marietta to manage household affairs more independently. She approached motherhood with the same dedication she brought to other aspects of her life, yet this period also highlighted pre-existing tensions within the marriage. Within their home, not all elements aligned seamlessly. A significant underlying factor was their divergent political orientations, which extended beyond mere conversation and created substantial divisions. Marietta identified strongly as a liberal, offering fervent support for the Democratic Party and the initiatives of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. Her convictions centered on principles of progressive reform, including advancements in social justice, governmental support for vulnerable populations, protections for civil rights, and efforts to restructure societal norms for greater equity. She developed these views autonomously, drawing inspiration from prominent individuals like Eleanor Roosevelt and from her personal observations. In contrast, Desmond adhered to conservative Republican principles as a lawyer, favoring established traditions, restrained governmental involvement, promotion of free market economics, and an emphasis on societal stability, perspectives informed by his professional experiences in law and possibly influenced by his Irish-American roots, which valued individual self-reliance. His affiliations included participation in Republican organizations, and he later contributed to the formation of entities like the Committee of 5 Million, which resisted specific international obligations, such as NATO membership, indicative of isolationist sentiments. These ideological differences manifested in frequent discussions at their New York apartment dinner table, often escalating into intense debates. For instance, Marietta might have commended the Works Progress Administration for its role in generating employment opportunities during the lingering effects of the Depression, while Desmond could have critiqued it for expanding bureaucracy and hindering private enterprise. Similarly, conversations on labor unions, where Marietta, who would later serve as a union shop steward, championed workers' protections, might have seen Desmond viewing such organizations as potential sources of disruption. As the prospect of war loomed larger, their stances diverged further on the United States' international posture. Marietta probably advocated for early assistance to allied nations, aligning with interventionist positions, whereas Desmond's conservative outlook may have inclined toward prudence and non-involvement. These exchanges transcended casual discourse, fostering genuine discord that strained the fabric of their union. During an epoch when political divisions permeated American society, evident in congressional confrontations and public demonstrations, their conflicting viewpoints transformed routine interactions into an understated arena of contention. Marietta occasionally experienced a sense of detachment as her principles conflicted with those of her spouse. The discord did not erupt suddenly, but accumulated gradually, akin to an approaching storm over their domestic environment. The demands of raising Francis in such a polarized setting required careful management of these frictions, yet it failed to conceal the widening gap. Over time, these political disparities evolved beyond simple differences, eroding the core of their partnership and complicating efforts to sustain equilibrium amid the broader turmoil of the period. A pivotal transformation occurred in December 1941 with the Japanese assault on Pearl Harbor, which propelled the United States into full participation in World War II. The country underwent rapid mobilization, widespread enlistments among men, expanded opportunities for women in the workforce, and industrial shifts toward producing military supplies. Desmond, having enlisted in 1940, was activated for duty, beginning as a private and progressing to major within the Army's liaison and intelligence units in the Pacific, encompassing arduous missions in Burma. His absences extended over prolonged periods, during which he received the Legion of Merit for courageous leadership in orchestrating activities under the harsh conditions of jungle combat and logistical difficulties. Remaining in New York with young Francis, Marietta did not remain passive. As a mother, in her mid-20s, she immersed herself in contributions to the war effort, securing an important role within the American delegation that aided the British Ministry of Information. This position entailed critical responsibilities in the realm of propaganda and informational strategies, aimed at enhancing morale among Allied forces, rebutting enemy misinformation, and facilitating communication linkages across the ocean. In this capacity, Marietta balanced parental duties with professional demands. The British Ministry of Information served as a central operation for wartime messaging, under the guidance of leaders like Brendan Bracken, producing materials such as posters, cinematic productions, and radio transmissions designed to unify public resolve against adversarial powers. From her base in New York, Marietta's contributions included interfacing with British counterparts, potentially preparing analytical documents, evaluating public sentiment, or assisting in the development of content tailored to foster American backing for the conflict. Concurrently, she held a position in the recently established Office of War Information, the American equivalent, where she managed aspects of personnel and supported the dissemination of uplifting information to maintain domestic resolve. Her involvement with the British component necessitated cross-Atlantic collaboration, possibly through cable exchanges or participation in sessions, amid precautionary measures like blackout exercises and alerts for potential air raids, though New York experienced fewer direct threats than cities like London. The work required intellectual acuity, diplomatic finesse, and resilience. Marietta excelled in it, directing her progressive inclinations toward a larger purpose. To bolster her finances, she took on research duties at Life magazine, delving into narratives that highlighted the personal dimensions of the war, encompassing accounts from servicemen and civilian adaptations on the home front. In this environment, she assumed the role of union shop steward, advocating for improved labor standards during a time of workforce scarcities and heightened production demands in publishing. Everyday routines were rigorous, arranging care for Frances with assistance from a nanny or caregiver, proceeding to workplaces resonant with the sounds of typing machines, incoming urgent communications from abroad, and ongoing radio reports on military developments in both European and Pacific arenas. Throughout, concerns for Desmond's safety persisted as he confronted perils in isolated regions like Burma, where transportation routes were unreliable and engagements were fierce. The war imposed trials on the populace at large, rationing enforced economies on fuel, sweeteners, and proteins. Community gardens emerged in urban green spaces, and campaigns for war bonds encouraged collective financial support. For Marietta, however, this interval transcended mere endurance, facilitating avenues for self-development, expanded professional contacts, and unforeseen personal explorations that would alter her trajectory. It was during these demanding war years that John Huston, the acclaimed film director responsible for works like The Maltese Falcon and various wartime documentaries, entered the narrative. Around 1943, or possibly nearer to 1945 amid Desmond's deployment, according to certain records, Marietta and John initiated a romantic involvement that echoed the dramatic elements of his cinematic creations. Their initial encounter occurred at a dinner gathering at the 21 Club in New York, a venue frequented by notable personalities, influential individuals, and those seeking respite from the prevailing somber atmosphere. Huston, characterized by his imposing stature, rugged demeanor, gravelly tone, and adventurous reputation, was engaged in producing documentary films for the Army Signal Corps. Unflinching depictions such as Report from the Aleutians and The Battle of San Pietro that portrayed the unfiltered realities of warfare, emphasizing the severe experiences of combatants. Marietta's keen intellect, attractiveness, and dynamic character immediately drew his interest. The relationship proved more than transient. Associates of Huston subsequently noted that Marietta represented the sole woman he genuinely cherished, imprinting a lasting influence upon him. The depth of their bond was profound and fervent, yet inherently intricate, unfolding through discreet encounters shielded from societal observation. Marietta, maintaining her marital status, maneuvered through this concealed realm of sentiments, possibly involving evening meetings in subdued eateries where jazz music provided a subtle veil for concerns, or serene strolls across New York under wartime lighting restrictions, exchanging aspirations, apprehensions, and moments of levity. Houston, recognized for his untamed pursuits, including prize fighting, expeditions for large game, and a series of prominent liaisons, found himself deeply enamored, perceiving in her a counterpart to his exploratory nature and thoughtful profundity. Their dialogues spanned extensively, explorations of filmmaking and its capacity to encapsulate human essence, political matters where Houston's progressive tendencies resonated with hers regarding opposition to authoritarianism, and visions for a reconstructed post-war society, and the intimate repercussions of the conflict that fragmented households and challenged allegiances. Nevertheless, elements of remorse and practicality dominated, Frances requiring maternal presence at home, and Desmond engaged in hazardous overseas intelligence tasks that called for discretion and valor. The liaison persisted intermittently, marked by fervor and absorption, with Houston eventually regarding it as his paramount affection, one that motivated yet ultimately wounded him. Beyond physical attraction, it constituted an alignment of intellects and emotions in an era of vulnerability, resembling a temporary refuge within the widespread disorder of international strife. Desmond's repatriation in 1945, following the war's conclusion, brought a hardened veteran adorned with the Legion of Merit and bearing unseen psychological burdens from his Pacific tenure. The reunion deviated from the idealized narratives prevalent in popular sentiment, tensions arising from extended parting, lingering political disagreements that had persisted via correspondence, and Marietta's individual progression through her autonomous wartime experiences surfaced prominently. She had undergone transformation, gaining assurance in her wartime capacities, and the entanglement with Houston introduced additional emotional intricacies. Seeking distance to address the complexities, Marietta requested that John relocate to California, where emerging cinematic prospects in Hollywood awaited in the post-war landscape. Houston, though devastated, complied with optimism, relocating westward to anticipate a shared path once dissolution processes commenced. As duration elapsed, however, he confronted the reality of her detachment. She emerged as the initiator of the separation, per recollections from his confidants, infusing the episode with poignant sorrow. The fervor of their wartime association signified a critical juncture, enduring in reminiscences and allegedly recurring intermittently across subsequent decades, forming a persistent strand of hypothetical possibilities interwoven into their distinct existences. For Marietta, it underscored the conflict among obligation, yearning, and matrimonial expectations, propelling her toward choices that would fundamentally alter her circumstances. In 1945, as the world emerged from the devastation of World War II, Marietta, then still married to Desmond Fitzgerald, a New York lawyer with whom she had shared 8 years and welcomed their daughter, Frances, affectionately called Frankie, in 1940, found her first marriage strained by ideological differences. Marietta was a fervent liberal Democrat, deeply committed to progressive causes such as civil rights and social reform, while Desmond aligned with Republican views. During the war, Marietta had served with the American delegation at the British Ministry of Information in London, an experience that broadened her horizons and introduced her to intriguing figures, including a brief romance with the charismatic film director John Huston, whose charm and talent left a fleeting but impactful impression, though it did not evolve into anything enduring. Seeking respite that year, Marietta and Desmond traveled to Barbados, staying as guests of Nancy and Ronald Tree, a couple they knew through social circles. Barbados offered an idyllic escape. Turquoise waters gently lapping white sandy beaches, palm trees swaying in the gentle breeze, and an atmosphere infused with post-war optimism and renewal. Ronald, often called Ronnie, was a compelling presence, a British-American heir with profound ties to wealth and politics. As the grandson of Marshall Field, the iconic Chicago retail magnate whose department store empire had revolutionized American commerce, Ronnie inherited a legacy of opulence. He had carved his own path, serving as a member of Parliament for Harborough in Leicestershire from 1933 to 1945, representing the Conservative Party and advocating for traditional policies that emphasized establishment stability, fiscal caution, and measured economic strategies. Ronnie and Nancy maintained an elegant estate and a network of influential acquaintances. During the visit, a spark ignited between Marietta and Ronnie. It began innocently with beachside conversations, starry evening strolls, and shared laughter over meals. The island's tropical ambiance, the vibrant sunsets, refreshing rum punches, and the liberating sense of release after wartime constraints intensified their connection, transforming it into a passionate affair that neither could dismiss. With the war's end, both couples confronted their marital realities. Marietta and Desmond amicably divorced by late 1945, acknowledging that their political and personal rifts had become insurmountable. Likewise, Ronnie and Nancy dissolved their union. Undeterred, Marietta and Ronnie proceeded swiftly. On July 26, 1947, they wed in a modest yet sincere ceremony that symbolized the fusion of two distinct realms. Marietta's vibrant American heritage rooted in New England's esteemed Peabody family, where her grandfather had established the prestigious Groton School, and her lineage boasted governors, educators, and activists, with Ronnie's Anglo-American sophistication underpinned by his Marshall Field fortune and parliamentary tenure. Ronnie infused their life with established grandeur and luxury, while Marietta approached the marriage with hopeful anticipation, seeking renewal after her first union strains. However, as biographies reveal, this was no unblemished fairy tale. It carried inherent challenges from the outset. Post-wedding, Marietta relocated to England, joining Ronnie at Ditchley Park, his majestic estate in Oxfordshire. Ditchley was an architectural marvel, a vast Georgian mansion nestled in undulating countryside, featuring impeccably manicured gardens, ancient oak trees, and a storied past that evoked authority and history. Constructed in the 1720s, it had welcomed royalty and prime ministers. Notably, during the war, Winston Churchill utilized it as a clandestine weekend sanctuary to elude German air raids on Chequers or London. Ronnie's first wife, Nancy Lancaster, a celebrated interior designer, had meticulously revamped it into an epitome of refinement, adorning rooms with antiques, tapestries, and premium furnishings. Upon arrival, Marietta assumed the role of chatelaine, managing a sprawling household staffed by 30 individuals, young estate workers who daily stoked fires in every fireplace, grooms tending horses in the stables, and mechanics maintaining cars in the garages, a head gardener arranging flowers bi-weekly, 2 chefs, 1 French, and 4 kitchen maids crafting elaborate meals, a dedicated still room for baking breads, cakes, and pastries, and even Ronnie's cherished nanny, Nanny Weir, residing on the top floor, having raised his sons from his prior marriage, Michael and Jeremy. Biographers liken Marietta's experience to that of the second wife in Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, not haunted by a spectral presence, but by the enduring imprint of Nancy's impeccable style. Initially exhilarating, with formal banquets, gatherings of politicians and aristocrats, and the thrill of immersing in history, the allure soon waned. Marietta, who flourished amid activity, intellectual discourse, and societal vibrancy, found rural English life oppressive. The perpetual afternoon teas, fox hunts, and monotonous schedules felt confining. The serene cadence of countryside existence, misty field walks, fireside evenings with unchanging companions, bred boredom and unease. She yearned for urban vitality, ideological diversity in places like New York or London, and avenues to pursue her fervent interests in democratic reforms and civil liberties. Ditchley, despite its splendor, morphed into an emblem of restriction, a luxurious enclosure ill-matched to her vivacious disposition. Politically, Marietta encountered renewed isolation, mirroring issues from her initial marriage. Ronnie was an ardent conservative, molded by his parliamentary years championing conventional values, fiscal restraint, and opposition to swift societal shifts. His circle, comprising landowners, MPs, and elite figures, largely echoed this Tory perspective, wary of labor unions, welfare growth, and America's progressive currents. Marietta conversely clung resolutely to her democratic ideals, promoting liberal changes, civil rights, and initiatives for the marginalized. Philosopher Isaiah Berlin once characterized her as a progressive liberal mixed up with naive left-wing sympathizers, encapsulating her sense of alienation in Ronnie's milieu. These disparities transcended theoretical debates. They emerged in dining discussions where Marietta defended Roosevelt's New Deal or Truman's Fair Deal, facing courteous yet steadfast resistance. This rift fostered a profound divide, prompting her to crave settings where her perspectives could flourish. Nonetheless, their affection persisted, with the political gulf introducing nuanced strains that demanded ongoing negotiation and concessions. Amidst these hurdles, profound delight arrived with their daughter Penelope's birth in 1949. Penelope emerged as a luminous family addition, nurtured in a transatlantic realm of privilege, yet poised to chart her distinctive course. From youth, she exhibited creativity, navigating Ditchley's formal environs and subsequent residences. As a 1960s teenager, she surged into fashion prominence, evolving into a supermodel and emblem of the period's defiant spirit. Her breakthrough occurred at Truman Capote's iconic black and white ball in 1966 at New York's Plaza Hotel, where she dazzled in a provocative ensemble, a billowing black tunic paired with snug tights exposing her midriff, described by attendees as more naked than dressed. The assembly was captivated with CBS cameras fixating on her. Icons like Cecil Beaton and Richard Avedon recognized her promise, propelling her to magazine covers that captured the era's liberated essence. Subsequently, she relocated to London, romancing photographer David Bailey, and epitomized swinging 60s London through her androgynous allure and norm-defying fashion. Penelope's triumphs echoed Marietta's autonomy. She transcended mere aesthetics, contesting conventions akin to Marietta's political endeavors. Yet biographical insights reveal complexities in family bonds. Penelope, like Frankie, sensed maternal detachment at times, though Marietta's devotion to her daughters remained evident. Frankie, from the first marriage, pursued excellence, becoming a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and historian, renowned for Fire in the Lake in Vietnam, securing the Bancroft Prize and National Book Award. Together, the daughters illuminated their lives, countering Ditchley's occasional dreariness. Financial strains intensified in the early 1950s. Britain's post-war Labour government levied exorbitant taxes, death duties, and income surtaxes, that depleted estates like Ronnie's. Sustaining Ditchley, with its extensive staff and maintenance, proved untenable. Despite his Marshall Field legacy, Ronnie grappled with shrinking assets, compelling difficult decisions. He sold the estate in 1953, though some records suggest 1949, a heart-wrenching pivot that resonated with Marietta's escalating wish for transformation. She had long desired liberation from rural seclusion. Ronnie, adaptable, consented to resettle in New York City, a relocation that invigorated Marietta like a return home. They journeyed comprehensively, accompanied by teenage Frankie, embarking on her trajectory toward journalistic acclaim, young Penelope brimming with vitality, and, for English continuity, Ronnie's faithful butler Collins and longtime driver, infusing their new abode with transatlantic quirkiness. They established in a generous double-width townhouse at 123 East 79th Street in Manhattan, transporting Ditchley's treasures, superb 18th century French and English furniture, fragile porcelain assemblages, lustrous Georgian silver, and invaluable artworks by John Constable, Thomas Lawrence, and Augustus John. It resembled grafting Oxfordshire refinement onto the Upper East Side, substituting rural tranquility with taxi hums and skyscraper glows. Additionally, Ronnie constructed Heron Bay, a Palladian villa on Barbados's Platinum Coast, which became a favored retreat, hosting luminaries like Winston and Clementine Churchill in 1960, where sailing, entertaining, and reflection unfolded. New York rejuvenated Marietta. She immersed in local politics, affiliating with the Lexington Democratic Club and ascending to county chairwoman in 2 years. By 1954, she joined the Democratic State Committee, orchestrating campaigns, championing civil rights, and connecting with reformers. This milieu suited her, the city's throb, varied assemblies, fervent rallies, and tangible impact opportunities. Ronnie acclimated, pivoting to investment banking and capitalizing on his parliamentary ties. Their residence evolved into a salon for thinkers, politicos, and creators, where Ronnie's conservative allies intermingled tentatively with Marietta's liberal cohort, yet variances endured. Marietta cultivated a profound, enduring bond with Adlai Stevenson, the articulate Illinois governor and dual presidential contender in 1952 and 1956. Transcending friendship, it was a years-long affair replete with ardent correspondence, mutual aspirations, and collaborative politics. Stevenson named her U.S. Representative to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in 1961, where she advocated global equity and women's concerns. She stood by him at his abrupt heart attack death in London in 1965, a profound bereavement. Remarkably, Marietta and Ronnie preserved their marriage. Ronnie displayed notable tolerance, possibly as their partnership matured into companionship over exclusivity. Biographies disclose Ronnie's bisexuality. He sought comfort with male companions, enriching their dynamic without fracturing their vow. As Ronnie increasingly resided in Barbados, Marietta enjoyed latitude for other pursuits, including liaisons with Stevenson, and later British architect Richard Llewellyn Davies. New York life brimmed with escapades. Frankie attended Radcliffe College, refining her writing prowess, and later reporting on Vietnam with bold acumen. Fire in the Lake earned her the 1973 Pulitzer, cementing its status as a pivotal text. Penelope's modeling soared post-black and white ball. She contracted with agencies, featuring in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, her slender form and audacious stances shaping mod aesthetics. She recounted exotic shoots and mingling with the Beatles and Mick Jagger. Household peculiarities abounded, Collins serving tea with unyielding propriety amid Manhattan's frenzy, the driver maneuvering a Ditchley-era Rolls-Royce through traffic. Marietta's mother, Mary Peabody, exemplified the activism Marietta inherited. At 72 in 1964, she faced arrest in a St. Augustine, Florida, civil rights sit-in, protesting segregation with clergy spouses, garnering headlines, and illuminating Marietta's origins. Ronnie's health declined with age, cardiac troubles, financial anxieties, but they persevered. He cherished Heron Bay, hosting guests, sailing and contemplating, while Marietta lingered in New York, engrossed in UN duties and societal advocacy. By the 1970s, their existences geographically diverged. Ronnie dwelled chiefly in London and Barbados, Marietta in New York, yet divorce never materialized. They spent much time apart, though united in matrimony, with Marietta entertaining gentleman friends into her 70s, including a later romance with debonair widower Eben Pine, a Groton alumnus. She bridged partisan gaps, befriending Henry Kissinger and Nancy McGinnis Kissinger, and attending 1980s gatherings for Ronald and Nancy Reagan. Their connection, kindled in 1945's Barbados radiance and forged over decades, withstood separations, infidelities, and pressures. Then, on July 14, 1976, calamity struck. Ronnie succumbed to a massive stroke in London, with Marietta in New York. It was a devastating finale. She hastened overseas, mourning her 29-year companion. Ronnie bequeathed Marietta scant funds, his assets eroded by taxes and errant investments, compelling her to vend properties like the New York townhouse and prized possessions for fiscal security. In the vibrant, post-war hustle of 1950s New York, where ambition fueled every corner and the Democratic Party pulsed with the promise of change, Marietta Tree steps forward as a dynamic force, transforming her social savvy into political power. From 1952 to 1967, her path intertwines high-level politics, a deep romantic entanglement with the eloquent Adlai Stevenson, and pioneering diplomacy at the United Nations. This period captures her evolution from a dedicated volunteer to a global advocate, marked by electoral battles, personal passions, and diplomatic breakthroughs. It's a tale brimming with determination, emotional depth, and the unyielding pursuit of progressive ideals, showcasing how one woman's energy helped shape an era of transformation. We'll trace her steps year by year, uncovering the drive that propelled her through campaigns, collaborations, and challenges, all while balancing a love story that added profound layers to her public life. Everything begins in 1952 as Marietta returns to New York from England, reuniting with her husband Ronald and their growing family, including daughters Frances from her first marriage and Penelope born in 1949. She's no novice to elite circles, having navigated high society, but now she's redirecting that privilege toward meaningful action in the political arena. Eager to make an impact, she volunteers as a researcher and speechwriter at the Democratic State Committee headquarters, immersing herself in stacks of policy documents, analyzing voter trends, and honing messages designed to resonate with everyday Americans. That year, she hosts an opulent gathering in honor of Adlai Stevenson, the charismatic governor of Illinois, freshly nominated as the Democratic presidential hopeful. Stevenson stands out with his thoughtful intellect and articulate style, a stark contrast to the more straightforward politicians of the day. He's challenging the revered war general Dwight D. Eisenhower, championing forward-thinking policies such as advancing civil rights, fostering global alliances amid the escalating Cold War tensions, and countering the paranoia of McCarthyism that gripped the nation with fears of communist infiltration. Marietta finds herself captivated by his progressive outlook, and what starts as admiration quickly blossoms into a romantic affair, igniting right in the midst of his intense first bid for the White House. This relationship isn't a clandestine whisper hidden away in shadows. It's vibrant, intense, and remarkably transparent within their sophisticated social sphere. Marietta's husband, Ronald, remains unruffled by the development. Perhaps it's tied to his own bisexuality, allowing him a broader acceptance of relational nuances. Or maybe their marriage has matured into a bond rooted in companionship and respect rather than exclusivity. Regardless, Ronald actively welcomes Stevenson into their world, extending invitations to join them at their refined townhouse in New York, as well as their luxurious retreats in sunny Barbados and cosmopolitan London. Envision those evenings, animated conversations over gourmet meals, where political strategies mingle with laughter, Stevenson captivating the room with his sharp humor and insightful commentary, and Marietta engaging fully, her gaze filled with genuine warmth and respect. Yet the campaign proves grueling. Stevenson's sophisticated rhetoric leads detractors to label him an egghead, dismissing him as too cerebral for the masses, and he suffers a decisive defeat to Eisenhower's widespread appeal. Despite the setback, it doesn't erode their connection. For Marietta, this marks the dawn of her deeper political immersion, with the affair weaving a personal narrative through her burgeoning professional ascent. Moving into 1954, Marietta's influence within the Democratic Party surges forward. She takes on the co-management of Anthony B. Akers' congressional campaign for New York's 17th district seat, diving into the nitty-gritty of grassroots organizing, canvassing neighborhoods door to door, mobilizing crowds at local events, and navigating the gritty realities of urban politics in a time when Republican dominance still lingered from Eisenhower's popularity. Though the effort ends in defeat, reflecting the broader challenges Democrats faced in that conservative-leaning climate, Marietta doesn't falter. Instead, she affiliates with the Lexington Democratic Club, a key gathering spot for progressive reformers in Manhattan's East Side, where like-minded individuals plot strategies to challenge the status quo. Her keen intellect, persuasive communication, and tireless organizational prowess shine through, leading to her election as county chairwoman just 2 years after joining. This position is a significant achievement, placing her at the core of party operations, where she oversees volunteer coordination, shapes local policy directions, and advocates for key initiatives. That same year, her momentum carries her to a seat on the Democratic State Committee, broadening her reach across New York State and allowing her to collaborate with statewide leaders on broader electoral plans. Through it all, her core liberal values, commitment to social equity, robust civil rights protections, and government support for the underprivileged fuel her efforts. Drawing inspiration from trailblazers like Eleanor Roosevelt, whose advocacy for human dignity and reform echoed Marietta's own aspirations, she carves out her identity, demonstrating she's far beyond a mere social figure. She's a formidable player in the political game. As 1955 arrives, Stevenson contemplates another presidential run, and Marietta commits wholeheartedly. She assumes leadership of the New York chapter of Volunteers for Stevenson, converting the elegant drawing room of her home into a vibrant hub for democratic activism. Think of the energy in that space. Prominent figures squeezing in for meetings, walls adorned with campaign maps and voter data charts, discussions stretching into the wee hours as they brainstorm tactics. She's at the forefront of fundraising drives, pulling in donations from affluent supporters orchestrating public rallies that draw enthusiastic crowds and maintaining the drive even as obstacles mount. Their romantic involvement persists throughout the 1956 campaign, infusing the high-pressure environment with an added dimension of emotional stakes. Stevenson faces Eisenhower once again, emphasizing platforms like phasing out the military draft, negotiating bans on nuclear testing to ease global anxieties, and promoting economic policies aimed at fairness and growth. However, the electorate favors Eisenhower's steady leadership and the prosperity of the era, resulting in an even more substantial loss for Stevenson. Following this, he retreats to his law practice and begins relationships with other partners, signaling a shift. Their bond doesn't shatter abruptly but evolves into something more sporadic and less central, with Marietta's private writings, diary notes, and correspondence, revealing a poignant blend of enduring loyalty and the ache of gradual separation. Nonetheless, she remained steadfast in the shared principles that first united them, channeling that resolve into her ongoing work. Despite these electoral disappointments, Marietta's trajectory continues upward. In 1958, the Modern Community Developers recognize her contributions to the Fair Housing Practices Panel, where she's actively combating housing discrimination, a pressing concern as the civil rights movement builds momentum, highlighting systemic barriers faced by minorities in urban areas. By 1959, New York City Mayor Robert F. Wagner taps her for the Commission on Intergroup Relations, a position she maintains until 1961. In this capacity, she addresses simmering urban conflicts, fostering dialogue and policies to encourage coexistence in a metropolis teeming with diverse populations and rapid social shifts. Concurrently, as vice chair of the New York Committee for Targeted Democratic Initiatives, she spearheads fundraising efforts for the Democratic National Committee's Advisory Council, securing resources vital for national strategies. A standout accomplishment comes when she contributes to drafting the civil rights section of the 1960 Democratic Platform, collaborating under the guidance of Eleanor Roosevelt's committee. This plank demands vigorous federal intervention to dismantle segregation, laying groundwork for the civil rights advancements that would define the 1960s, including landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act. Then in 1960, she serves as deputy chair of the Citizens Committee for John F. Kennedy, lending her organizational expertise to JFK's campaign. Kennedy's magnetic presence and his New Frontier agenda, promising innovation in space, education, and social welfare, align closely with her vision, and her work plays a key role in securing New York's electoral votes for him. His victory affirms her strategic acumen, paving the way for greater opportunities on the national and international stage. In 1961, President Kennedy acknowledges her loyalty and skill with a historic appointment, United States Representative to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. Sworn in on March 1st, 1961, she becomes the first woman to occupy this influential role, marking a milestone for gender representation in diplomacy. This placement reunites her professionally with Adlai Stevenson, now the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, creating an ideal convergence of their worlds that sustains their personal tie amid shared duties. The UN environment is a maelstrom of activity, intense discussions on decolonization efforts in Africa and Asia, condemnations of human rights violations in regimes like apartheid South Africa, and navigational challenges posed by Cold War rivalries between the U.S. and Soviet blocs. Marietta dives in, leveraging her progressive background to champion policies, promoting equality, freedom, and justice worldwide. She holds her seat on the Human Rights Commission from 1961 to 1964, engaging in intricate bargaining sessions, co-authoring key resolutions, and forging coalitions with delegates from varied nations to advance universal standards. In 1964, she achieves another first by attaining the status of permanent ambassador while serving on the UN Trusteeship Council, which monitors the progress of trust territories towards self-governance and independence, aiding the wave of post-colonial nations emerging on the global map. That year also brings her an honorary Doctor of Laws degree from the University of Pennsylvania, a prestigious accolade honoring her impactful work in international relations and human rights advocacy. Yet success is tempered by profound loss in 1965. On July 14th, while Marietta and Stevenson are walking near the U.S. Embassy in London, perhaps discussing UN matters or reminiscing about past campaigns, he abruptly succumbs to a heart attack. She's by his side in that critical moment, attempting to administer aid in desperation, but he succumbs later at St. George's Hospital. The blow is devastating. That evening, she confides to her diary the simple, heart-rending words, "Adlai is dead. We were together." This marks a sorrowful close to a liaison that traversed electoral trails, international borders, and even covert arrangements. They often employed pseudonyms like Mr. and Mrs. Johnson or Mr. and Mrs. Richardson for discreet rendezvous at acquaintances' residences, preserving privacy amid public scrutiny. Stevenson had been more than a partner. He was her mentor in politics, her intimate companion, and a kindred spirit in idealism. His passing creates an irreplaceable emptiness, but Marietta transforms the sorrow into renewed purpose, pouring it back into her diplomatic endeavors. Following her departure from the official U.S. delegation in 1965, Marietta doesn't retreat from the fray. Between 1965 and 1967, she transitions to the personal staff of UN Secretary General U Thant. Operating within the Secretariat as a special advisor, this role shifts her focus to quieter, yet crucial, behind-the-curtains diplomacy, where she provides expert counsel on pressing global concerns, such as maintaining peacekeeping operations in conflict zones and supporting economic development in emerging countries. Her involvement in 1966 and 1967 is hands-on, drawing from her accumulated expertise to inform strategies that address the era's volatilities, including the Vietnam War's escalation and Middle East tensions. However, 1967 introduces a point of contention as the feminist wave swells, pushing for greater gender equality. Marietta declines to endorse 3 UN resolutions focused on women's rights. This decision raises eyebrows considering her own pioneering achievements as a woman in male-dominated fields, but it underscores her autonomous mindset, possibly viewing the measures as overly aggressive or misaligned with her pragmatic approach to reform. By 1967, as the world grappled with the social upheavals of the late 1960s, civil rights marches, anti-war protests, and shifting gender norms, Marietta was emerging from the shadow of Stevenson's loss, ready to embrace fresh opportunities. It was during this time that she encountered Richard Llewellyn Davies, a distinguished English architect and urban planner whose innovative designs were revolutionizing cityscapes across the globe. Born in 1912 and educated at the University of Cambridge, Richard was a modernist pioneer, renowned for projects that emphasize functionality, community integration, and forward-thinking urban development. He had founded Llewellyn Davies Associates in the 1950s, a firm that would become synonymous with ambitious planning efforts, from hospitals and universities to entire new towns. At the time Marietta met him, Richard was married to his wife, Patricia, with whom he had children, but that did not prevent a profound connection from forming between him and Marietta. Their relationship quickly evolved from professional admiration to a deep romantic affair, one that seamlessly intertwined their personal lives with shared professional endeavors. Marietta, drawing on her own financial acumen and network, played a pivotal role in financing Richard's business expansion into the United States, demonstrating her savvy investment instincts and unwavering belief in his talents. This move was not without risks. She invested her own resources to help establish a foothold for the firm in America, betting on Richard's vision to pay off. By 1968, Marietta had officially become a business partner in Llewellyn Davies Associates, taking charge of the New York office, a position she held until 1980. Her brother, Malcolm Peabody, later described her role as that of a rainmaker, a term borrowed from business lore to denote someone who brings in clients and opportunities through sheer charisma and connections, rather than technical expertise. Indeed, Marietta was not a trained architect or urban planner. Her background was in political science from the University of Pennsylvania and hands-on experience in diplomacy and activism. Yet, she excelled as a networker extraordinaire, leveraging her vast circle of influential contacts, from politicians and philanthropists to international leaders, to motivate city officials, secure lucrative contracts, and drive major projects forward. Their partnership was nothing short of electric, combining Richard's technical prowess in design and planning with Marietta's magnetic personality and global perspective, which she had sharpened during her UN tenure, advocating for human rights and social justice. Together, they embarked on ambitious ventures that spanned continents and addressed pressing urban challenges. One notable project was a slum rehabilitation initiative in Manila, Philippines, where they collaborated to improve living conditions for underserved communities, focusing on sustainable housing, infrastructure upgrades, and community involvement to uplift residents from poverty. Marietta consulted on similar efforts in far-flung locations, such as Hong Kong, where rapid urbanization demanded innovative solutions for high-density living. Borneo, tackling environmental and indigenous community concerns in development plans. And Beirut, navigating complex geopolitical contexts to propose resilient urban frameworks. Her travels for these projects were extensive, often involving site visits, stakeholder meetings, and advocacy for designs that prioritized human needs over mere aesthetics or profit. She wasn't content to be a figurehead. Marietta delved into the details, pushing for thoughtful, people-centered approaches that echoed her lifelong commitment to progressive causes. For instance, in Manila, she emphasized incorporating local input to ensure projects respected cultural norms and addressed inequalities, drawing parallels to her earlier work founding Sydenham Hospital in Harlem in the 1940s, the first interracial voluntary hospital in the U.S. This romantic and professional bond with Richard lasted until his sudden death in 1981, a devastating blow that came unexpectedly, likely from health complications exacerbated by his demanding career. Richard, who had been elevated to the peerage as Baron Llewellyn Davies in 1967 for his contributions to architecture, left behind a legacy of transformative designs, but his passing also saddled Marietta with some of his estate's debts, underscoring the financial vulnerability she had embraced in supporting him. The loss was profound, marking the end of a chapter that had been both romantically enriching, providing companionship and passion in her later years, and professionally groundbreaking, introducing her to the intricacies of urban planning and design. Even in reflection, Marietta spoke fondly of their time together, crediting Richard with broadening her horizons and allowing her to apply her diplomatic skills to tangible city-shaping outcomes. Their affair, while discreet, was known in social circles, and it highlighted Marietta's pattern of deep, meaningful relationships with brilliant men who shared her intellectual fire. With Richard's death in 1981, Marietta, now in her 60s, refused to retreat from public life. Instead, she pivoted astutely to secure her financial independence, leveraging her extensive network to land high-paying directorships on corporate boards, a remarkable achievement in an era when women were scarcely represented in such elite male-dominated arenas. The 1970s and 1980s saw increasing pressure for gender diversity in business, spurred by feminist movements and regulatory shifts, and Marietta became a symbol of this change. One of her key positions was on the board of directors for CBS, the broadcasting giant, where she was appointed by Chairman William Paley amid growing calls to include women in leadership roles. At CBS, Marietta brought her keen insights to media strategy, informed by her experiences rubbing shoulders with public figures during her UN days and her understanding of communications power in shaping societal narratives. She participated in discussions on programming, ethics, and expansion, often advocating for content that reflected diverse voices, drawing from her civil rights background. Similarly, she served on the board of Pan American World Airways, or Pan Am, the legendary airline that epitomized global jet-set travel in the post-war era. Pan Am was facing industry turbulence in the 1970s and 1980s, deregulation, competition from low-cost carriers, and economic recessions. But Marietta contributed to strategic deliberations, offering her international savvy on routes, partnerships, and customer service innovations. Her global travels, from UN missions to architectural consultations, made her an asset in navigating foreign markets. Another significant role was on the board of Lend-Lease, the Australian-based construction and real estate conglomerate, where her expertise in urban development, gained through her partnership with Richard, helped guide major expansions and projects. Lend-Lease was expanding internationally during this period, and Marietta's input on sustainable building practices and community impact aligned with the company's growth ambitions. These directorships were far more than ceremonial. They provided substantial compensation, enabling Marietta to maintain her elegant lifestyle in New York, including her townhouse filled with antiques from her marriage to Ronald Tree, without dependence on family wealth or others. In an interview reflection, she once noted how these roles allowed her to blend her activist roots with corporate influence, pushing subtly for ethical practices amid profit-driven decisions. Beyond these corporate engagements, Marietta held the esteemed position of women's trustee on the board of the University of Pennsylvania, her alma mater, where she had studied political science from 1936 to 1939. UPenn, an Ivy League institution with a rich history, was still evolving in terms of gender equity during the late 20th century, and Marietta advocated vigorously for women's issues in higher education. She pushed for increased scholarships for female students, greater representation in faculty and administration, and programs addressing work-life balance for women pursuing careers. This role tied deeply to her personal history. At UPenn, Marietta had excelled not in traditional academics but in athletics, as a field hockey and tennis star, and politics, serving as class president and honing the leadership skills that would define her life. Her family's legacy in education, her grandfather's founding of Groton, her father's role as a bishop and educator, fueled her commitment making this trusteeship a way to give back while challenging institutional barriers. In the 1980s, as New York City grappled with urban decay, crime waves, and economic shifts under mayors like Ed Koch, Marietta assumed another pivotal leadership role as chairman of the Citizens Committee for New York City. This citywide organization, founded in 1975, was dedicated to empowering neighborhood groups to improve their communities through grassroots initiatives. It wasn't a ceremonial post. Marietta chaired it with characteristic vigor from the early 1980s until resigning just 9 months before her death in 1991 due to declining health. Under her guidance, the committee focused on practical support, providing grants, training workshops, and technical assistance to local residents, tackling issues like affordable housing, park revitalization, public safety, and youth programs. Marietta's leadership transformed the organization into a powerhouse for positive change across New York's diverse boroughs, from Brooklyn's brownstone neighborhoods to Harlem's historic streets. She organized fundraising events, rallied high-profile donors, and inspired a network of volunteers, often drawing on her own civil rights activism from the 1940s, when she co-founded Sydenham Hospital and her UN human rights work. Her brother, Endicott Peabody, who served as Massachusetts governor from 1963 to 1965, and the broader family legacy of public service, including her mother's arrest at age 72 during a 1964 civil rights sit-in in Florida, further motivated her. Marietta believed deeply in community empowerment, once stating that true progress came from helping people help themselves, a philosophy that guided the committee's efforts to foster self-reliance in underserved areas. Yet Marietta's later years weren't confined to boardrooms, planning offices, and civic meetings. She added a layer of glamour by venturing into cinema, reconnecting with echoes of her past romances. She had an uncredited role in the 1961 film The Misfits, directed by her longtime flame, John Huston. This iconic movie, starring Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, and Montgomery Clift, was a poignant Western drama about drifters in the Nevada desert, exploring themes of isolation and lost dreams. Marietta appeared in a brief scene as Susan, opposite Clark Gable, a subtle nod to her enduring bond with Huston. Their relationship dated back to World War II, when Marietta, working with the American delegation at the British Ministry of Information in London, embarked on a passionate affair with the charismatic director. John, known for classics like The Maltese Falcon and The African Queen, fell deeply in love with her, proposing marriage multiple times. According to close friends and biographers, Marietta was the only woman John truly loved, the great passion of his life. Yet she ultimately left him, choosing initially to stay with her first husband, Desmond Fitzgerald, before divorcing and marrying Ronald Tree. This decision haunted their lifelong friendship, but never fully severed it. They remained in touch with mutual respect and lingering affection. Fast forward to 1988, and Marietta made her final on-screen appearance in Mr. North, a whimsical film directed by Danny Huston, John's son. Based on Thornton Wilder's novel Theophilus North, this lighthearted story featured stars like Anthony Edwards as a mysterious young man with healing powers, and Lauren Bacall in a supporting role. Marietta played Amanda Venable, a small but meaningful part that added a personal touch to the production. The movie was released in July 1988, about a year after John Huston's death from emphysema on August 28, 1987, making her involvement a bittersweet tribute to their profound connection. Danny, continuing the Huston family legacy in filmmaking, likely cast her as a homage to the woman who had meant so much to his father, Rumors perpetuated by Marietta's daughters, Frances Fitzgerald and Penelope Tree, and John's friends painted her as his ultimate love, the one who got away. Their 1940s affair was intense and fiery, set against the backdrop of wartime London, with John seeing in Marietta a blend of intelligence, beauty, and independence that captivated him. Though her path led elsewhere, to marriages with Desmond and Ronald, and later affairs with Adlai Stevenson and Richard Llewellyn Davies, John remained a constant thread, a testament to the enduring affection that transcended time and choices. Throughout these years, Marietta's personal life continued to evolve with grace and discretion. After Richard's death in 1981, she resisted persistent calls from admirers, including the debonair widower Eben Pine, a Groton alumnus and charming figure in her social circle, to pen her memoirs. Marietta preferred living fully in the present rather than dwelling on the past publicly, though she shared anecdotes privately with close friends. She served on the Metropolitan Museum of Art's 100th Anniversary Committee in 1970. Blending her love for culture and art with her networking prowess, helping organize exhibitions and galas that celebrated New York's artistic heritage. Politically, she demonstrated her ability to bridge divides, befriending Republican figures like Henry Kissinger and his wife Nancy McGinnis Kissinger, and even attending events for President Ronald Reagan and First Lady Nancy Reagan in the 1980s, despite her lifelong Democratic roots. Philosopher Isaiah Berlin once aptly described her as a progressive liberal mixed up with naive left-wing sympathizers, capturing the eclectic nature of her social and political circle that spanned ideologies. Intriguingly, Marietta refused to align fully with the burgeoning feminist movement of the 1960s. At the 1967 New York State Constitutional Convention, she angered fellow delegates by declining to sign 3 resolutions on women's rights, adhering to her independent views that emphasized individual merit over collective advocacy. Marietta's final years were marked by a fierce private battle with health issues. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, undergoing a double mastectomy, but kept her condition secret, telling friends she was merely suffering from influenza to avoid pity or intrusion. True to her stoic New England upbringing, she fought the disease with determination until her death on August 15, 1991, at her home in New York City at the age of 74. Her ashes were buried by her daughters, Frances Fitzgerald, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist whose 1972 book, Fire in the Lake, provided groundbreaking insights into the Vietnam War and earned acclaim for its depth and nuance, and Penelope Tree, the iconic 1960s fashion model whose androgynous style and high-profile career rivaled that of Twiggy, later transitioning into writing and activism. Marietta had raised them strictly, eschewing toys like dolls in favor of instilling values of hard work, service, and intellectual pursuit, lessons drawn from her own life of activism and achievement. And that wraps up today's video. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, leave a comment with your feedback, and subscribe to stay updated on upcoming videos. Appreciate you watching.